We are live. Hello and welcome to Kirtan London Journey to Joy, brand new podcast, episode 3, Seeking Guidance with your hosts, Madhva Anderson and
Caitanya Cintamani.
We are so excited to be diving into the juiciest wisdom bites of the Bhagavad Gita. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take this beautiful, beautiful ancient knowledge and just chew it up and make it digestible. It's a journey for the two of us, journey to joy. And the idea is we're doing it with everyone. So we're very excited about it.
Right, so first we are going to pay our respects to our teachers, to ground ourselves and to beg for grace and blessings, especially from Swami Prabhupada, who wrote the book. So,
should we start? Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha.
Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastatya Deshatarine.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I love it. Invocations are always grounding, a very, very grounding experience, which, to be honest with you, right now,
we need it.
We need it. We've been having so many technical problems at my end. It's just been one of those moments. My cheeks are flushed red. It's all good, but the invocation was good. I'm glad we did it. So, like we said, today, myself and Cintamani, we're going to be discussing the first half, more or less, of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Right. Lots of concepts, lots of interesting topics.
We say that the first half because chapter 2 is so vast. There's so much there. And the sound is too low. Let me bring this in a bit.
Okay.
Can you guys hear us better if I do that? I put it maybe a little closer to Cintamani because I have a loud voice.
Ananda's asking if we can change the settings on the mix. What does that mean?
Okay, I don't know. I think we're going to have to stick to the settings we have just because this whole tech stuff right now is lost me. So hopefully you can hear us. Hopefully you can follow us with this one.
Yeah, let us know. Maybe we have to get more close or something.
Let's try that. Okay.
Hopefully that's good.
So we're looking at the beginning of chapter 2 because it's called the summary, the contents of the Gita summarized.
So all the concepts that we're going to be going deeper and deeper into, in terms of chapter 2, they've all been kind of spoken about in brief. And we start with Arjun, who's really not interested to fight his family members on the battlefield. And he has a sort of crisis, and Krishna tells him, give up your petty weakness of heart. And he starts to give all the reasons why he should be fighting.
Yeah. Yes, this is a very, very interesting chapter. There's some amazing concepts in here. Concepts
Mhm.
that I sometimes in the past have almost struggled with because Arjuna's situation seems so understandable. So I know this is the third episode already. So if you're listening, you've probably heard the previous episodes. But I just want to put again a little context on Arjuna's situation. He's on because we're still early. We're still only on chapter 3. So
Go ahead.
chapter 2. So Arjuna's in a situation now. Arjuna's a great warrior, and he's in a situation where he has to fight his family members in order to win a kingdom that was stolen from them. And he really doesn't want to do it. And in this chapter, he gives lots of good reasons as to why he doesn't want to do it, and reasons that kind of make sense.
Right.
And in fact, even in the Gita, in the commentary by Srila Prabhupada, who is the author of this book, he writes how, although his reasons are misguided, they do show his integrity as a person. He is a very righteous person by nature.
Hmm.
It's just in this case, he's misguided.
Right. Because he's supposed to be doing his duty, and his duty is to establish righteousness, to protect the innocent. And if he gives up the notion of fighting, of chastising these people who have done so many terrible things, he'll be walking away from what he was basically born to do.
Yeah. I listened to an amazing lecture today, a class about this chapter, an overview. And the speaker, he made such a brilliant comment at the beginning, made me smile. He said, some people in this world are wise. And some people in this world are otherwise. That was brilliant. Some people are wise, and some people are otherwise.
Otherwise. But
So the Bhagavad Gita is there to take those of us who are otherwise
and make them wise.
It really is that. It was so brilliantly put. Anyway, so it starts with chapter 2 is essentially, we could go into, because there's so much here. Sometimes I feel like we can hardly do it justice in a short podcast scenario like this.
We're at the bottom of a mountain almost. It's just so much to unpack. There's
so much content. So I would definitely recommend, if you're listening to this, if you find value from this brief discussion that we're having, trying to dive into it as much as we can, I would definitely recommend reading the book for yourself. But we'll do our best to summarize it and to pull out some of the practical wisdom. So the way that chapter 2 is essentially set up, it starts with this universal question. So if you separate the Gita a little bit from its exact scenario, which is Arjuna on a battlefield 5,000 years ago, his confusion is a universal confusion. So the questions that Arjuna presents are questions that have had relevance to people since time immemorial and for time to come.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a universal confusion. Started like that.
It happens to the best of us, basically. Yeah. Arjuna is all of us, and we all sometimes end up on that precipice of making a choice and not always knowing what the right thing is to do.
Exactly. So in this scenario, in Arjuna's scenario, saying, what should I do? But for all of us, it could be, what should we do? What should we do with our life? How do we navigate this life?
Exactly. And Arjuna, at this point, Arjuna and Krishna are friends. They're the same age. They're both sort of young kings, and they're both familiar with each other.
Friends.
And the dynamic is friendly. It's lighthearted. It's informal. But then Arjuna, he makes this pivotal statement where he says, I'm confused about my duty and I don't know what to do. Now I'm submitting myself to you. Please instruct me. And that's when the whole relationship kind of changes.
So this is an interesting point.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like you were leading into something here.
Yeah, sure. You want to carry on?
Okay, I know what you're leading into. I can carry on.
You get it.
The idea of submitting ourselves to a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
accepting someone as a guide, particularly in spiritual context.
Right.
This is a really interesting point for me. There was actually a point in my life where I struggled with this point, because the message that we're seeing here when Arjuna submits himself before Krishna is a beautiful verse, though. He says, now I am a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me.
Yeah.
So there's this beautiful transition from Arjuna, like you said, being just a friend to surrendering to Krishna, specifically to Krishna. And it indicates that if we want to overcome this confusion that we have, Arjuna's confused, he's lost. If we want to overcome that, this is something that we all need to do. We all need to submit ourselves, because we're lost. We need to submit ourselves to someone who's not lost.
Right.
It's like, if you're driving and you don't know where you are, you need a sat nav.
Exactly.
In today's day and age, we need a sat nav. And so
nobody rolls down the window anymore and asks, like, do you know where we are? No, you got your Google, your sat nav, you're set.
Something or someone who knows where you need to go and how to get there.
Right.
So we're in this Vedic, in this bhakti tradition, this I understand, as far as I understand it, in any tradition, whether it's spiritual or material, when you're lost and you don't know how to get somewhere, you need a guide. So this works in business too. We need mentors. This works in education. We need teachers. And it's very, very true on a spiritual journey as well. But perhaps even more important, that we turn to someone who knows what we need to do in order to lift ourselves out of the confusion that we're in.
It's exactly. And it takes an enormous amount of courage, actually. If a person is distressed or in anxiety, depressed, to actually be able to stop and say, I need some help here. I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. Nowadays it's, if you put it in context of nowadays, Arjuna is basically having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so many of us, we might go day to day having mini panic attacks or struggling with depression or anxiety and not asking for help. And so if you need some sort of sign to ask for help, this is it.
It's funny. I remember having this discussion with a friend a few years ago, because this point is emphasized, that if you want to move forward spiritually, you need to turn to someone who's already there, who can help you along that path. That's how the system, the system, spiritual system works. And I remember feeling a little bit like, well, I can do it alone. I can. Why do I need to accept a teacher? I don't need to do that, basically. That's how I felt. And it was almost this prideful ego that I can do it alone. And I remember someone who I really respected at the time, we were talking on the subject, myself, a friend, and this respectful elder. And he was saying, you need a guide. You need a guide. You need someone who's further down the path than you, ideally at the destination, who can help you along that path. And at that point, he said it so directly, and it had been a question in my own mind and my own heart. And because it was someone who I just fully respected, something switched. I just had to accept it. And actually, I felt like some realization came in that it makes sense. It makes sense that this is something that I would need to do. So this is a beautiful example of Arjuna doing that right in the beginning of the Gita.
Right.
Arjuna makes that that brave, vulnerable decision to surrender.
Surrender.
It's a big word.
That is the big, big word.
Big word.
Yes. Put your hands up and say, I need help. I need you to help me. Yeah. And then that's when their whole relationship changes, right?
Yeah.
To a formal teacher student relationship. It's quite amazing because when you think about your friends, you know, the you might have a friend who brought you to the spiritual path, um, but you might not necessarily think of that person as like a guru or someone who can show you the way. They're just like that guy that you know.
Right.
Uh, but these things are so Arjuna, he turned to Krishna because he knew Krishna is trustworthy. He can trust him. He's
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on this point. I see it a lot. I see it in
mm,
myself. That, the story I just told, it was me. I had that kind of ego that I can do this alone.
mm,
But now that I'm thinking about it, this is so prevalent. I feel like we all feel like that.
yeah.
And I see a lot of people don't think that I need to accept someone because it makes us feel inferior. We're like, well, they're not more intelligent than me. Or I got this. I can do this myself. I see it a lot, not just in myself. I see it in
Yeah.
myself. I see it in others as well. And it just, one of the things that I was reflecting on when I had this conversation with this senior friend of mine is there are so many. It's hard to try and do it alone. It really is. From what I understand, it's not impossible, but it's just very hard. There are so many mistakes, pitfalls that we can make. We get lost in our own little world. Imagine trying to get from A to B, long distance trip, long distance. Let's say you're trying to drive from one side of a country to the other side of the country, for
Mm,
example, and you had no map and you had no idea how to get there.
yeah. You'll get lost.
You're going to get lost. You're going to go down some weird old funky roads and you're going to you're just very, very, very unlikely to make it to your destination unless you have a guide of some sort
And it's
to keep you on track.
unnecessary. It's unnecessary too. Like, why should you go down that road alone when you can ask for help?
Yeah.
When you don't have to be alone. It's nobody really wants to be alone, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Well, why the need to put yourself through such a hardship? Mm. And when you genuinely want to advance in spiritual life, then the teachers come.
That's also very true. Very, very true point.
Mhm. Because you're taking steps towards the divine, towards Krishna, and so he takes steps towards you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Did you have something you wanted to move into from there?
Um, hmm. Right. So, um, then Prabhupada in the purport he says that he verifies that Arjuna has done the right thing, and he says that taking
Refuge.
refuge, refuge in Krishna is the right path for peace and harmony.
Mm.
And he talks about how, um, there's ultimately Krishna. He, he's the
Divine.
I've the divine. I've lost the train of thought, but he
He's.
help me.
Oh no, I didn't know if you were trying to say a word.
No, I was, but I've lost it.
Krishna is. Yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately I don't know what you were trying to say.
Start a new thought.
I'll start a new thought. Okay, so I was going to look at Arjuna's situation.
Mm.
I was going to look at Arjuna's situation and just talk it through a little bit in the sense that Arjuna's presenting some very okay. So imagine if you're reading Arjuna and Krishna's conversation at the beginning of chapter 2, basically what Arjuna is saying, he says, I don't want to fight because I don't want to kill my family members.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the cause of I don't want to cause irreligion. Why would I even want to be in a kingdom when my seniors, I should respect my elders. I have elders on that side. These all seem like very logical arguments. And then what Krishna says straight away is like, it's almost like, what?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, although you speak learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief.
Mm.
And basically he calls him out. He's like, yo, you're being foolish right now, Arjuna.
Mm-hmm.
So despite all of these very, very what seem like logical arguments, Krishna is saying, no, you're confused right now.
Right.
You're misguided right now. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And it comes down to how Arjuna is identifying himself. So this is one of the key points on a spiritual path now that we're starting to touch on, that you have to understand this, and this is where spiritual advancement can start, which is what's our true identity. And chapter 2 talks a lot about this.
Mm-hmm.
But what's our true identity? So imagine a high court judge. A high court judge who on a daily basis, he's seeing people come in and he's sentencing them, and people have committed serious, horrible crimes. And he's saying you're guilty or you're innocent, and he's sending people to prison, so on and so forth. And
right.
One day, his son is now the person who's in court, who's being accused of murder. And it seems very clear
Mm-hmm.
that he's guilty. Okay, let's be for real here for once. If that was actually happening, he would have to recuse himself. Of course, this wouldn't normally happen in real life circumstance, but let's just say, for the sake of this example, that now this judge needs to sentence his own son. Like, what? What would you do? And so how does this judge identify himself? Does he identify him as, I'm a father. I'm this boy's father.
Right.
I need to save him no matter what. I just need to somehow or other save this situation, and I'll just pull whatever strings I can, and I'll even though he's committed a heinous murder, I don't want him to go to prison.
Mm.
That's one way he could identify himself. That's one way he could behave. He might identify himself more as the judge and realize, well, in this situation, although he's my son, I have a moral duty to perform, and so I have to sentence him. He has to go to prison.
Right.
And this is a little bit like Arjuna's scenario here. And what Krishna is trying to tell him is, you need to reframe your identity. Right now, you're making a decision on a misguided identity that you're the body. So that's what's being discussed here, is that if you're seeing things through that lens, that I'm the body,
mm-hmm.
if you're seeing things through that material lens, you're already misguided. You're already going to be making decisions on the wrong level, no matter how justified they may sound. Krishna is trying to educate him and say, my friend, you are not this body.
Your compassion is misplaced.
Your compassion is misplaced because you're thinking about it from a material context.
Mm.
You're a spirit soul. That's who we are. We're a spirit soul. That's kind of one of the key points of this first opening chapters, is that we are not this body. We are an eternal spirit soul. And when we realize that, then we can start to think from that platform.
The picture's so much bigger. And Prabhupada talks about how he gives a really funny analogy in the purport. Well, I found it funny. It's maybe not that funny, but he says that to identify with the body is to cry for the dress of a drowning man, like to try and save his coat while he's still in the water. Like it's misplaced. It's out of touch, and it's impractical.
Yeah. I was just looking over at the comments to see how How are we doing? Thank you for engaging. Please feel free to drop any comments in the comment section, guys.
Yes, talk to us.
If you have any questions, any comments, you want to add anything,
Mm-hmm.
it's my laptop's a little out of the way, but I can look over and see what's going on there sometimes. So nice to see some engagement. Hello, Sunita. Nice to see you. Ananda and Sundari. Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, right. We have so many identities in this body. We have so many. This guy who was talking today in the lecture that I listened to, he calls them functional identities. So, for example, my job might be one of my identities, my job title. That's how I see myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or this psychophysical apparatus that I have. So I was born into a man's body. I've got this male nature. I have certain things I have to do according to my body, according to my nature. Maybe I support a football team, so I have that functional identity. I'm a whatever supporter.
Mm-hmm.
Or I may, he gives the example of this really top of his game, elite pro cricket player. So that was his identity, functional identity in that period of time. He was a pro cricket player. And in one game, he fell on his shoulder, injured it really badly, and that was the end of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, the identity that he had was completely, it crumbled. It was lost.
All right. Who am I now?
Because underneath all of these functional identities that we have, maybe it's a parent, a brother, a sister, we have a fundamental identity. We have an eternal identity, which sits beneath all of these ever-changing functional identities. And that is where we come back to the Atma. The Atma is the Sanskrit word for the soul, the spirit soul.
It's an interesting point to talk about now, I think, because during this world crisis of the pandemic, a lot of people have kind of lost their identities. And it was definitely like quite a crisis for me in the beginning when, because I have I serve in the temple voluntarily, and that's like my main day-to-day activity is just to be there to help with the services, and then of course there's kirtan, so a big part of my life is to do this kirtan around the world, and all of a sudden we can't travel, we can't meet up, temples closed. So it's like, oh, I'm not this person, and I'm not a kirtan person, and I'm a stay-at-home person. And so what does that person do? I had to figure it out. Like, okay,
So true.
it's if you press too much into these functional identities, when it gets taken away, it can be quite stressful, distressing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you can people, that's what causes depression, mental breakdowns. I have a guilty pleasure. I watch a lot of random just stuff on YouTube sometimes.
Yep.
I waste too much of I don't have a TV, so that's my kind of
Me too.
my outlet for it. I watch random stuff on YouTube. And recently somehow, and it's funny because what YouTube does is when you watch one video, then it feeds you more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I started watching different videos about homeless people, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, some of their stories are crazy. One of them recently that I watched, he was a millionaire. He was a legit millionaire. He had lived his life as a wealthy person, and he had some kind of medical problem that forced him into retirement, which still wasn't a problem. He had he was still a millionaire, but the company that he was his company, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
A few months into his retirement, went bankrupt, shockingly, unexpectedly, and he was left with nothing. 6 months later, his mother died of cancer.
Oh.
He lost everything. He literally lost everything within a moment. His wealth was lost. Within 6 months more, his mother was lost, and he went from being a multimillionaire most of his life
Mm-hmm.
to living on the streets.
terrible.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is there are similar examples of this, similar stories to this within the spiritual hagiographies of people who are very serious about their spiritual life and very, very advanced. And these kind of things, even when they've happened in their lives, don't faze them at all. It doesn't cause that deep suffering within us. I mean, this is quite an extreme example, this example of this millionaire. But we all have it, like you said. You had a similar example in your own life where I'm this person and now I'm stay at home. Now I have no life. It was kind of a similar thing for me last year. COVID was difficult for us financially, and it forced us to really shake up what we were doing with our lives. We moved country because of it in the end, because of work and this and that. And by Krishna's grace, I'm very, very fortunate to say that we're okay now. But there was a very, very shaky period of time. My ego was hurt. I make money. No, I don't make money. Now I'm just a useless man, and all of this. This kind of conversation can go on in your mind.
Yeah.
But for those who are living on a deeper platform than that, who really are living on the soul level, none of this stuff phases you. I had a beautiful analogy today as well. So apparently there was a scuba diver who some years ago, when a tsunami hit the subcontinent of India, there was a scuba diver in the water that day. There was a shock tsunami. And this guy who was scuba diving at the time was deep underwater out at sea. And while he was swimming, he noticed, oh, I'm rising. I'm going up, up, up. And then he slowly went back down to normal. And he thought it was strange, but he hadn't realized what had happened. And so when he came up, he went to his boat and he went to go back to shore. And he said everything had been destroyed. There was no shore anymore. Everything had been destroyed.
Oh, that's like my worst nightmare. Oh.
Yeah, I could see you squirming when I was telling the story. I was like, is she okay? Yeah, it's hard. Krishna Chaitanya, it's a terrible thing to have happened. But what's interesting is, and it's a great analogy, he was deep underwater. And so the effects of what was happening on the surface, on the shallow level, that then destroyed so much of the subcontinent of India at the time, didn't affect him in the same way. And it's a great analogy for life. When we go deep, when we really look at who are we, what's the purpose of this life, who are we really? And if we know that, how are we supposed to act now on this knowledge, rather than acting always on the surface level? I'm a man, my name is Madhva, I do this, I do that. If we're acting on that shallow level constantly, if that's our only perception of life, when those tsunamis come, and trust me, they come one way or another, we're going to be shaken. We're going to be shaken to the roots. So that's why this is one of the primary points that the Gita stresses is, you are not this body. You are not all of these functional identities that you think you are. You are Sat Chit Ananda. You are an eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss, spiritual being. And when we transition to that, we're going deep and we can live in a completely different realm, and these shallow things don't affect us so much.
Excellent.
It's a nice analogy, isn't it? It's a true story as well, apparently.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. I'm just...
Sorry, Cintamani.
It's all good. Oh, yeah. Who are we when everything is stripped away?
Yeah.
Yeah. The soul doesn't actually get affected by all these things that happen to us.
Right.
And Krishna, he says right there, that we're not to lament for the temporary happenings of the body.
Yeah, a wise person laments neither for the living nor for the dead.
Right. That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
See, I've got little snippets of verses that are just stuck in, like
Mhm.
sentences like that, powerful sentences, powerful phrases that are stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
The wise lament neither for the living nor for the
Mhm.
dead. Like, whoa, that's deep.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like there's I easily talk a lot, Chintamani. So I want to see if what else you had on yours, because I've got more stuff on my list of things I wanted to talk about, but I'd like to see what you were thinking about as well.
Right. So, um, firstly, Krishna says right off the bat, we are eternal spirit souls. And he says, there's no time when you and I didn't exist,
Mm,
and there's no time when we will cease to exist.
mm.
Right? Very beautiful verse. I forget it now, but it's really beautiful. He says, there's no time when we don't exist, and there's no time when we won't exist. We are forever spirit.
Read it. There it is, right there.
Thank you. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be.
It's one of the ones I know.
Mhm. It's so, this is kind of like a main point for many people, even if they don't know anything about Bhagavad Gita, especially in India, they still hang on to this point, when it comes to grief and loss and when, especially if someone dies, then they feel like, oh, I'm separated from this person, but their soul is forever.
Yeah.
And I've there's no loss in that way, because that person has just moved on.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
It's a great place to start, even just theoretically, to be able
Mhm.
to make that transition. I don't know. I was raised with this, so for me, this is so natural. But I feel like for lots of people, this is a completely new concept, and I'm sometimes curious how it lands with people. You're not this body. It's because it's such an important point. I know we've been talking about it for a while already, but
Mhm.
it's such an important point. Like if I said to you, "Who are you?" This is like something that um, what do you call it? This is an exercise that people do
Right.
sometimes. Like, who are you?
Hmm.
If I asked you, Chintamani, to point at yourself, who are you?
I'm Chintamani.
Yeah, your neck.
I'm
Yeah, exactly. Right.
right.
I'm my name. Am I my name? I
Mm-mm.
can change my name. Am I my body? If I lost my arm tomorrow, would I be less Madhva than I am today? On one level, you could say yes, but
Yes.
me, the consciousness,
Hmm. No,
I'm
you're
still the
still
same
you.
person.
You lost an arm, but the rest of you is intact, and everything inside is goes on.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's just, to me, it's common sense. And I'm curious how it lands for people who are perhaps hearing it for the first time. I can only imagine it's like, wow, so true. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
it's also just a really comforting thought, that death and things that we might be afraid of are just transitions from one state of being to another. And in the purport, maybe not this one, but he likens it to changing of clothes. This that's the next verse, right? um he's basically saying, as the
embodied soul. Is that the one?
embodied soul, yeah. So, yeah, thank you. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So he's comparing, a baby obviously doesn't look the same as an adult. He's gone through many changes, and in the same way, the soul changes from one body to another. So that's an interesting concept right there.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Reincarnation, as
Yeah,
it were. And sometimes people make fun. They're like, "Oh yeah, last life I was a cat and now I'm me." But it's actually a lot deeper than that.
it is. When you
Mm.
understand this point, as the soul continuously passes in this body,
Hmm.
You're the same person, but this body is constantly changing. So why is that not assumed it would continue to happen at death? But there are also lots of stories of people remembering previous lives.
People do.
There are lots and lots of well documented, factual stories of people who literally. This is it's a phenomena that sometimes happens in young children, that they'll remember a previous life, or they'll speak a language that they've never encountered in that birth,
Hmm.
and they'll speak it fluently, or they'll write a language that they've never come across. And you can look this stuff up. This is
Yeah.
real. There are stories about young children in families, either they were Christian families or atheist families, and their parents at the beginning of this, as the child was starting to talk about stuff,
Yeah.
they just thought they were rambling, or maybe they'd heard it somewhere, and then it would go on for long enough that they thought, what's going on? And they would research it, and they would see what this child has been saying is legitimately true.
It all adds up. All the dates are correct. Everything. They know things that nobody else knows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a real thing. It makes some reincarnation to me makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And what is the counter argument is generally comes from the scientific group,
Right.
which is interesting, and science is the study of matter.
Matter. What you can see, what you can feel, what you can perceive with your senses directly.
Wait for this one, Chintamani. Science is the study of matter. Bhagavad Gita
Hmm.
is the study of what matters.
Aha.
But
Nice.
I heard some fantastic quotes today that I love. I couldn't wait to use them. You can see my face like, oh, I was so excited to say that one.
Keep them coming.
But it's true. Science is the study of matter.
Mhm.
Bhagavad Gita is the study of what matters. And you can break down the study in matter in this way. You've got gross matter, which is generally the whole realm where science deals with. It's very, very limited. Gross matter, what we can see, what we experience. Let's measure it. Let's analyze it. Let's make theories. Let's hypothesize all about matter and what we can see and do with it,
Mhm.
and how it works. Then you have subtle matter. Generally, science doesn't even go into the subtle matter realm, but even there are some forms of science that do go into that. There's the Institute for Noetic Science, which is a branch of science now that deals with what we consider superhuman areas
Mhm.
or spiritual areas. They'll look at the power of the mind, for example, and
Right.
there's some very interesting studies on what the mind is able to do. The mind is like an antenna, so we transmit thoughts, and it's almost equated when you look into it. The mind can transmit the equivalent of a physical weight, and it can move matter even.
Oh.
And those who are able to harness the ability of the mind, there are studies about it where there's photons shone through a gap onto a card, and they're completely random. The photons are just going in there randomly. And when you bring in a meditator, someone who focuses their full attention on the photons line up, and and there's no other input on this scenario except for the introduction of a person focusing their mental energy on that.
Mhm.
So now that there is some science is starting to venture into subtle matter as well. So there's gross matter, subtle matter, but beyond that, there's spirit, which science has no idea about. It just has no idea. So that's why we say, and this is the most important realm of all three.
Right.
We can talk about this. Yeah, we're gonna build a whole colony on the moon, and we're gonna make rockets, and we're gonna make cars that drive with water. And it's like, okay, that's all cool, awesome, bro. That's wicked. Really, what does any of this matter at the end of the day? What does any of this stuff matter? There's something so much deeper. None of our happiness doesn't come from material things. I think anyone who's wise
And not otherwise.
not otherwise
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
understand that our happiness doesn't come from material things. So science only deals on that realm, and that's fine. I'm not trying to badmouth science here. Science has its place, but it doesn't have the capacity to fully break down and understand the full reality of the world that we live in. And to the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is all about the spiritual
Spirit.
reality.
Mm.
So, you know,
Right.
I forget exactly where I was going with that, but I feel like it's all connected to what we were just talking about.
We're talking about reincarnation.
Thank you. Reincarnation.
Excellent. But yeah, science, as you were saying, is somewhat limited when it comes to spiritual topics.
Yeah.
And Bhagavad Gita is diving right into where science has never been. And sometimes um, it can be quite abstract for those of us who have been raised to apply understanding through scientific observation.
Thank you. What else
Thank
did you
you.
have on your list in time? I'm actually looking at it now.
So, um, yeah, so Krishna, he makes this point, we're eternal, we're forever, and, um, the outcome of this battle is predetermined already. Um, Actually, it was, uh, what did I see today? It was so beautiful. Um, Balaram, our friend Balaram, he was talking about, oh, he was sharing a video of Shruti Dharma,
Yeah.
one of the teachers, and he was saying that Krishna had said to Arjuna, "This battle is already won. Do you want to be an instrument or not?" And so basically, the idea being that the outcome is already there, and all Arjuna has to do is do his duty, pick up the glory, and um, in that way, be happy within himself.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so then he says, um, do for this fight for the sake of fighting,
Mm.
which, without considering happiness or distress, without considering winning or losing, without thinking, oh, you know what's going to happen to the other guys, what's going to happen to me,
Mm.
and then by doing it like this, you finally, um, you will have attained perfection.
Thank you, Cintamani. You actually wrapped up. You brought the conclusion back to my point by saying this. Krishna is telling him, you need to think on the spiritual level.
Hmm.
And then when you're doing that, these other considerations become less important. Yeah, beautiful point.
It's good.
It's another thing I saw is that there are, on this point, still on this point, there are three types of conduct. So we have moral conduct, which is more like social, political. We have religious conduct,
Hmm.
religious morals, and then above that we have spiritual conduct. And that's the platform. If we can get to that platform, that's when we're acting in intelligence. It's not that the others are bad, it's just the spiritual conduct trumps them. That's all it means. And what does that mean? It means acting with a desire to please the divine. This is where the surrender part comes in.
Yeah.
And this is what bhakti is all about. And this text, this Bhagavad Gita, this is one of the primary sacred literatures of the bhakti-yoga tradition. Bhakti means, it can be translated in different ways, but primarily it means loving devotion. And yoga means connection or to reunite. So we are connecting, reuniting with the divine person, Krishna, through loving devotion. And that's where this supreme spiritual conduct comes into play. And so, although Arjuna seems to be making so many good arguments, and they are good arguments in one sense, It's not to say that he's being stupid. They're good arguments in one sense, but he's thinking on the wrong level. In this particular scenario, he's thinking on the wrong level. He's thinking on the material, moral conduct platform, to some degree on the religious conduct platform,
Right.
but he's not thinking on the ultimate, supreme spiritual platform. And that's where we're trying to get to. And again, it's not to say that these other platforms, other ways of thinking are bad. They're good. They're there for a reason. We should be thinking like that. But it's just realizing our highest duty in this life. And duty is another interesting word. But let's reframe that. The most intelligent way we can become happy, because that's what duty is there for. It's a guideline for us to live a life of happiness. Not get lost like we spoke about at the beginning, that driver with no sat nav going from one side of the country to the other. If we want to live a life of happiness, the most important consideration is this supreme conduct, this spiritual conduct. Right. Thinking on the platform of, I'm a soul. My true nature is I have an eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Person, and my actions should be tied into trying to reawaken that relationship. Right. Bhakti-yoga. And so this is the primary guidebook for that. And we're starting off with one of the primary points. You ain't that. We're not this body. We have to realize that in order to be able to start.
Excellent. Yeah, the person who thinks like this has in mind the ultimate benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
So Krishna, he could understand that, this action is going to be for everyone's benefit. Even the losers who are going to get killed, their annihilation serves their ultimate purpose too. So it all, when you think on that level, spiritual level,
yeah,
you see what's good for the souls.
Right, exactly. You're tying it all up, Cintamani. I love it, because I started a point earlier about the judge thing and I lost my train of thought. I didn't feel like I wrapped it up so well.
No, I felt it. It was working.
It's a great analogy, and so this is so I it's just what you're saying is so perfect. Because we're going to be lost sometimes on this level. Sometimes we're not going to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when we bring it back to this, what's my highest duty here? Even if it sometimes seems difficult or challenging in this moment, in the long run, it's beneficial for everyone. Right. Again, I lost my train of thought on that one, but that's fine. No. There's lots going on here. We're trying. We're doing our best.
How's everybody doing? We have...
Yeah. No.
Yes.
Thank you, Amit. I appreciate the comment. And yeah, Nanda, it's a great quote, isn't it? Science is the study of matter. Bhagavad Gita is the study of what matters. Yeah, I love that one.
It's good.
I was excited to share it here. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Maybe we can switch that for the juicy knowledge bites thing.
Juicy wisdom bite. I know, but I was already planning on maximizing on that too, making it a regular appearance on the show. So Krishna goes on to make a point of describing the qualities of the soul. Mm-hmm. And he's saying how the soul basically is indestructible. So the real you is indestructible. It's eternal, it's indestructible. And he explains that in lots of ways. And he's trying to help Arjuna understand that even in this situation, because in this situation, his situation is quite extreme, but in his situation, he's in a battle and he now has to kill people. Mm-hmm. People he loves, his elders, his respected people, all these respected people, his family. But the real them never dies. And so in this scenario, because they've morally, religiously, and spiritually acted with complete misconduct, again, come back, imagine how long are you going to allow your son to go around murdering people if you're that judge, just because he's your son? Mm-hmm. Is that the right thing to do? Maybe it's debatable. Maybe there's some debate there, but I think we could agree that no, even though he's your son, we know that if he's just going free killing people and you're protecting him because you're his father, you're also implicit in those actions.
You're in the wrong.
You're in the wrong as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's the scenario Arjuna finds himself in. The opposing side is basically that son who've committed atrocity after atrocity after atrocity, and they're going to go on doing that. But he doesn't want to. I don't want to kill them. I don't want to fight and win back and stop them from doing what they're doing, because ultimately they're my family. So he's thinking on that level.
He doesn't even care about the kingdom, which is, it's really sweet. He just wants everyone to be okay, but he's even prepared to give it up, and he talks about begging, that he'd rather go begging in the street than have this horrible action on his head.
Yeah.
He really wants everyone to be all right.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
And I've just been flicking through this chapter just while we're talking, seeing what else pops out. And it's so funny. This verse is so perfect for this exact point. Krishna says to Arjuna, one who has taken his birth is sure to die. And after death, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. So Krishna is telling him, basically, despite all of this stuff that seems to be going on, you need to be thinking on the spiritual, on this highest platform. That's what's going to carry you through.
Mhm.
And when you come to that platform, you don't have to worry, you don't have to lament anymore. Besides these, because on the bodily level anyway, we come, we go. It's inevitable. Right?
Right.
So I say it and I get it. I get it theoretically. But on a real level, it's a challenge. It's a challenging one where we're at where we're at, right?
It's definitely, it takes a lot of practice, self introspection, and a lot of kind of reprogramming of everything that we've been taught. Especially if you weren't raised with it, you have to kind of start training yourself, and that's why the teacher is so important, because the teacher helps you see the bigger picture.
You one step ahead of me, Chintamani. I was thinking that exact same point. You were saying the teacher's so important?
The teacher is so important because he helps us to see the ultimate benefit, which is what Krishna is doing right here for Arjuna. So our business, Prabhupada is prescribing for us um, this point that we should be looking for our teachers in spiritual life, because those people point us in the right direction.
Yeah. And they also inspire us in the right direction.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking, sometimes these points, great, we can accept them theoretically. And I do, but it's one thing to accept something theoretically, it's another thing to realize it within your heart.
Yeah.
Realization comes in different ways, but primarily it comes through the grace of the teacher. And that's why it's so important. That's why one of the first big things that happens in the Gita is we see Arjuna surrender to Krishna as his teacher. Prabhupada talks, he emphasizes we have to accept someone, because, and I can think of it times in my own life where I've either had very, very deeply profound experiences, what I would say are spiritual experiences, or something has really just churned and clicked for me, or I felt inspired from within to behave a certain way, to act some way, or to change my way of thinking
Hmm.
when I've been around profoundly deep spiritual teachers.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's so important. So important. That's how we transition, especially from the theory side of it, because we can probably do a lot of the theory side ourselves. We just pick up a book and read.
Yeah, anyone can read.
Yeah, and it's
The
great.
understanding, the realization.
The realization comes through the teacher, right?
100% through the teacher. And the the mode of inquiry is so important as well. I think that's also a point that was made, that the when you approach your teacher, you have to be um, with an open heart, submissive. Um, you have to be ready to hear whatever they're going to tell you. We had this. This is just coming to me now, but when, I don't think I mentioned this before, but I grew up in India. I spent 12 years there. I mean, they don't
I
know,
know.
but Um,
They don't know.
yeah. So we went to a school which is like a kind of bhakti school for girls. So it was like a finishing school with all these spiritual things mixed in. And one of the things that they taught us, it was probably one of the first things that they taught us, like on the first day, they were like, we're not going to teach you if you don't want to learn. The whole premise was that it's an offense to the pure knowledge that we have to give it to someone who's not interested in hearing it.
Mm.
So they were like, if you want to learn, you have to ask.
Mm.
And before that, we're not able to teach you anything. So the first day we kind of had to like say our hearts are open. We want to learn from you.
Mm.
And that's kind of what Krishna was doing. Like he was it it's actually mentioned that he was smiling because he was waiting for Arjuna to say like hello.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he sees
I'm
Arjuna
lost.
freaking out, but he knows he's like it's coming now. Now I can help him as long
Yeah.
as he asks. Mm, yeah, I forget where I was going with that.
Don't worry, Chintamani. We
It's
just
all good.
we go around, we
Yeah,
share something nice, and then we
yeah,
bring each other back. I lost my train of thought numerous
yeah.
times today. It's all good.
It's all
And then
good.
what happened was you would say something that triggered me and brought me back to where we were meant to be.
Right.
You know, I just want to raise this one thing again because I said it last time in the last episode, but it's just so powerful. And it's just this one phrase, the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a beautiful phrase for me. We all go through them. Arjuna right now is going through this dark night of the soul. And we typically don't appreciate these moments in our lives. We find them to be undesirable. Like we like to be good all the time. We're like, I'm good, I got this.
Yeah.
And to the extent sometimes we can stigmatize and almost like if someone else is going through it, we don't really want to hang out with them, you know? I feel we just we like people's Instagram role. And as soon as you see that person who goes online and starts saying how bad their life is, we're like, yo, shut up, man. This ain't the space, man. I don't want to hear about that.
Not the forum.
I come here for positivity. Get lost. And we stigmatize it. And we all know that it's fake anyway. That those Instagram posts, those Facebook posts, we know it's not real anyway. It's someone's real, is what they put out to the world. So funny. I was looking at pictures of this couple and I was like, oh, man, they look so happy. And then I spoke to another friend who knew them too. And was like, yeah, man, their life's in shambles. I was like, what? I was like, they look so happy. He's like, you know what Facebook does? That's how it's supposed to look. We see those memes where there's a couple arguing and then they're like, okay, let's take a selfie. Hey, and they smile. And then they go back to arguing. So, okay, so I almost lost my train of thought, but I'm back with myself.
We're back.
Dark night of the soul. Mostly we don't like it. We don't want to accept it. We stigmatize it.
Mm.
However, this is what Arjuna's going through. And when you see these experiences through a spiritual lens, we understand these to be some of the most powerful transitional phases of our life, almost to be, not almost, it's a rite of passage in our life if we approach it with our eyes open, because we can just shut down and run away from it. And typically that would be when someone turns to alcohol or drugs. Typically, maybe there's other ways that we can just ignore these things. Maybe we turn to food or something. But if we approach this and we try to do it right, and we say, I'm going through this difficult moment in my life, and we use that as an opportunity to wake up, these are the most powerful moments in our lives, and they can be the most transitional, transformational blessings in our life. It's a rite of passage. I went through, I feel like, I feel like I went through a dark night of the soul last year. Particularly intense one for me. Not that I haven't struggled before with things, of course I have, but last year was particularly intense. And this with good company or good association, trying to seek guidance from the right people, trying to keep my head above water, trying to turn to the right places, the Bhagavad Gita, this spiritual knowledge, people who have been through what I had been through in one way or another and had come out the other end stronger for it because they'd made the right choices, turning to those kinds of people. I can see how it becomes a blessing in my life. I can see how it becomes something that I really, really appreciate. And it takes me deeper in my own focus, in my own. So Arjuna is the perfect example of that. He's going through a dark night of the soul. He turns to Krishna, the ultimate teacher, the ultimate guide, the supreme person. And it just sets a great example for us.
And 5,000 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
We are indeed.
Good stuff. That looks like, that feels like a...
So I feel like I started off a little bit nervous, a little shaky, but as we went through that, I feel like we pulled out some of because we only did the first half of chapter 2.
Right.
I feel like we did a relatively good job of getting through. There's so much more. There really is so much more.
There's a lot.
There's so much. Feel free to go check it out. Bhagavad Gita, as it is, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. That's the name of the author.
Mm-hmm.
You can always drop us a message if you want to know more about it. If you don't know which book to get,
can message Kirtan London.
Kirtan London, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But there, as far as picking up on some of the key points, as we went through that, I realized I could feel it coming out. It was nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cintamani.
It had flow. It was working.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I just feel like, that analogy, I was thinking of the analogy of the sat nav and how I feel like I started going blind. Let's go. Where are we going? And then gradually we turn on the sat nav and we found our way. So we normally like to finish. We do finish these podcast episodes, seeing as we're Kirtan London, with a little bit of Kirtan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I'm going to hand it over to Cintamani, who's going to wrap up today's session with a beautiful Kirtan. So I'm very excited about that. So shall we just slightly
let's
readjust?
Shuffle around a bit.
All right.
So I'll get down here. Shall I pass you the mridanga?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I have to do one sound change here as well, which I'll do.
Okay.
Alright, we're good.
Okay.
Audio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Do I need to?
You can just, as long as it's close, it's good.
Okay. I'm so used to the temple mic that's like
right in your face.
Eat it or it doesn't work. Okay. So, one of the most pivotal parts of this chapter is when Arjuna says to Krishna, Govinda, I will not fight, puts down his weapons and gives up. So here's a mantra with the name Govinda in. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. You might have heard it before because it was fairly popularized by George Harrison back in the 70s, as it were, and by the Hare Krishnas back in the day. And it's become such an iconic prayer that it's actually sung every morning in most bhakti temples around the world. So it's very important and addresses this key figure, Govinda, who gives pleasure to everyone, to the senses, who gives peace and solace to the senses.
Yeah, we could.
Been that long without Madhva. It was
Oh,
like
God, all
having
this-
so much fun.
Technical stuff, man. Here, look, there we go.
We're back.
All right.
Alright.
Oh, forgive us for all these technical flaws in our presentation, but
It's all good.
thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Kirtan London, Journey to Joy, episode 3, Seeking Guidance.
Thank you so much.
In our next episode, we're going to be looking at the second half of chapter 2, which is titled The Science of the Self. I feel like we've already started the subject.
Getting there.
We'll go deeper.
Nice.
We'll be that scuba diver out deep in the ocean, going deeper. So that's what we're going to be doing next episode. It's the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. This week we had to make a small change, unfortunately, but normally it's every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. So we'll be back in 2 weeks on Wednesday evening
Right.
at 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
here on the Kirtan London live YouTube channel. So please do come, please do join us. We're going through the Bhagavad Gita systematically. We're picking out the juiciest wisdom bites from it. And we're on our own journey of exploring the Gita deeper. And we really want to share that with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time.